Now, Australia's competition watchdog is planning on letting internet users decide what personal information websites can share with advertisers. Now, the government says the move will bring more competition to the digital advertising market, which they say is currently dominated by one player, which is Google. This is the latest in a dispute between the government and the tech giant, where the government wants Google to pay license fees for using local news content in search results. Google had earlier threatened to pull the plug on its search engine in the country and is reportedly planning to launch its own news portal. All right, Dennis-Kenji Kipker is the scientific managing director at the Institute for Information, Health and Medical Law at the University of Bremen, and he joins me now from Germany. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Now, allowing users to decide on what personal information they'd like to share with advertisers will drastically change the way tech giants like Google will operate in the country. Just walk us through exactly how this change will and can happen.
Yeah, the problem is that the entire business models of the big tech companies and social networks are based on the fact that users' personal data can be used free of charge and very extensively. And if legal adjustments were to be made here, this would mean losses in the billions for these companies, and possibly complete business models could disappear. And Google is now trying to prevent this in Australia, as this is a landmark case, a precedent that could also influence legislation in Europe. And if Google does not show strength now, there is a concern that European countries could adopt a similar legislation to that in Australia. And in the EU, there is already a legislation similar to that one in Australia, but it is significantly weaker at the moment. And in this respect, the European Union is now looking at Australia.
Right, and Google is now thinking of opening up its own news portal and removing its search engine for use in Australia. Again, another big change for how people will be using the internet there. How will this affect users in the country, especially small businesses who benefit from Google services?
Yeah, Google's plan behind this is to show that it's possible to come to a legal agreement with newspapers and online portals and publishers, even without a certain legal regulation. And the problem, of course, is that such solutions are not equally accessible to all publishers and may not always be in the right remedy for all companies. And however, the concept of a news portal could, in principle at least, be a viable way of regulating the remuneration of publishers in the future. In this respect, the legislation in Australia is once again a beacon for future issues in this field. However, it is at this moment difficult to say at the point whether smaller companies in particular will benefit from this. What is certain, in my opinion, however, is that many companies in particular are depending on listing in Google in order to gain customers. And the withdrawal of the search engine from Australia would cause serious problems, in my opinion.
Right, and how can we expect Google's news portal to operate and look like if they do indeed go ahead with creating one?
We can only speculate about this at the moment. But what is quite certain is that it must be an equivalent replacement for the existing offerings of Google, and perhaps even of a greater added value than before. And that perhaps even more articles will be available in full text due to individual contracts with the publishers. But what one can be curious at the moment. So it is not safe to say which development this will take.
All right, Dennis-Kenji Kipker, thank you so much for joining us on the program and analyzing that for us.